one of them. Popping at the mouth or the side of his neck when he pouts, no argument, no rebuttal from. He ain't from my town, I don't know him, so I'm guessing he's a clown.
Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. So there's people whose hair is absolutely on fire because WWE released 12 more NXT talents today, August the 6th, 2021. And everybody was heartbroken and disheveled and being very, very melodramatic about it. So I want to talk about the situation first and how, if you look at, I think, all of the different stories that have been coming out for the last several months. And then we're going to get into the releases. Then we're going to talk about some of the things that I noticed about the releases, some trends, some things like that, how they measure up to all the other stories I've heard. And then we talk about, Vince and his, maybe we'll give him some more talent joke that sends Raj Giri of Wrestling Inc. He sent him up the wall and now he's very, very upset. Okay, so the first thing I noticed is that over the last several months, if you remember, there's been a lot of talk about different things going on with NXT. Remember, there was this concept of NXT Underground. Then there was the NXT Evolve thing that they were doing with Gabe Sapolsky. There was a lot of stuff that they were talking about during the pandemic that, was just, inklings of there going to be some type of change to the NXT brand. This stuff was going on when NXT was on Wednesdays, going head to head with AEW. They was talking about, the different changes that might need to be necessary for NXT. So along with these releases came some backstage news, take it for what it's worth, about how NXT is changing. New logo, new lighting, new format for the show, different presentation, that they're changing NXT. And part of that was the releases. So I started taking all that into account when I sat down, I thought about it, and I said to myself, okay, everybody is flipping out. They're going to sell the company. They're doing this, they're doing that. I'm like, okay, look, everybody's been saying that. The truth is sometimes a lot simpler than most people want it to believe. They've been talking about revamping NXT for months. Before the Adam Cole was, his contract came up, before the whole thing with Karrion Kross and, them jobbing him out and all that stuff, they were talking about restructuring NXT in the middle of last year, 2020. So it was always all these ideas being pitched and tossed around. And it seems like after all of that talk, they finally came up with something. And in doing so, they decided, okay, if this is the direction that we're going to go, we don't need all of these talent. We don't need all these people that we have. And so they decided to start shredding talent. And in doing that, you have committed to this new direction. Now, again, the new direction is supposedly they're going younger, better lighting, better presentation. It's going back to being a true developmental program. And in doing so, a lot of the people that they released have been people that they had under contract for a long time. Also some older talent. Okay, so now let's go through some of the releases. The releases are, all 12 of them, Kona Reeves, Mercedes Martinez, Bronson Reed, Tyler Rust, Leon Ruff, Bobby Fish, Jake Atlas, Ari Sterling, Giant Zangier, Asher Hale, Zachariah Smith, and Stefan Smith. So, of this list, if we are to believe what they said about, okay, NXT's going younger, there's at least 4 or 5 people on this list already that I can recognize as being not young. Let's put it like that. Mercedes Martinez is almost 40. Tyler Rust is over the age of 35. I noticed that when he first debuted. I was like, this guy's 35 or 36. Bobby Fish is is probably over 40. Asher Hale is 36. Okay, he's not young. Now, I don't know how old most of these other talents are, but Kona Reeves has been on the roster forever, and the guy's not getting any better. I refuse to say that Kona Reeves is an amazing talent. No, he's Kona Reeves. Come on, give me a break. Okay, now, there is some confusion, because if you're going young, why did you cut Jake Atlas and Leon Ruff? Neither one of those guys are even 27 as far as I know. I think when I looked at Jake Atlas last, I think he was 25. And I think that Leon Ruff is around that same age. So if you're going to go with younger talent, those are two guys you should have kept. Of these names that I looked at, the only one that really, those two kind of like, because Leon Rush got a bit of a push, and I figured he still was not done. That he still could have done more. He still had more to contribute. I think Jake Atlas was very, very bland, but that's NXT's fault for not giving him a personality or a character. And Ari Sterling. Ari Sterling only bothered me because the guy had been under contract for less than a year, and he hadn't really had a chance to do anything. So that means I really didn't get unless I sat down and watched 205 Live, which of course I would not do. Why would I do that? I didn't see anything that he's actually done. I think he probably had one match on NXT proper, and that was it. So he was like on the roster for literally no reason, you know? So it was, those three specifically had me kind of like, I really would have liked to see more of those guys. I would like to see somebody to actually put some effort into making Jake Atlas interesting if he had something to be interesting about. Same thing with Leon Ruff. And to see actually what Ari Sterling can do. The rest of these don't really bother me too much. Now, the ones that got everybody so upset is Mercedes Martinez and Bronson Reed. Basically, Mercedes Martinez is, how else do I put it, but a charity case. She's been around for 20 years, and everybody's like, no, she's got so much experience. It's like, you're not getting it. I think that's part of the reason why she got fired. It's that she's been around for 20 years. Just got that concussion from Xia Li. It's just something to consider. Right? It's just something to consider. Now, a lot of people have been upset about Bronson Reed because Bronson Reed is a prototypical Vince guy. He's a big dude, can have a big, nasty heel on the roster. And yes, I am surprised that they got rid of Bronson Reed, and I thought he would be a Vince guy. But I've never been a huge fan of Thick Boy. Never been the hugest fan of Thick Boy. He's okay, but I never thought he was like fantastic or great or, and I think sometimes people get very melodramatic about this stuff because they like these people personally and they think of it personal and not business. In terms of business, I probably wouldn't have cut Bronson Reed personally. There's always room for a monster heel on the roster, somewhere. On some roster, there's always, Raw could use one, for instance, other than Lashley. Especially since they're not going to make Karrion Kross that guy right now. So, there's always room for another big dude to do big dude stuff. But that's, he's also been working a lot of dark matches, so that's something to consider. And I'm not as beat up about it as everybody else. I'm never really a big fan of Thick Boy, and I don't have the connection to everybody else that other people have. So I can look at things from Vince's perspective and Nick Khan's perspective and Triple H's perspective, or whoever made the cuts. We'll never know who made the cuts. And say, okay, this is a business decision. We can't hold on to all these talent. The NXT's budget is ridiculous. And NXT is, has ever since they tried that whole third brand nonsense, which made no sense because it was still developmental, even as they was trying to push it as the third brand, they were still signing people 12, 14 at a time to developmental deals. And most of those people were just not doing anything. They just weren't doing anything with these people. They're just bringing them in. They had the pictures and the property of WWE or property of Performance Center t-shirts, and they weren't, it was over. like that was it. They just go into the meat grinder, and then they come out eventually, and that was it. So I didn't like that. I wanted to be able to see the people that you hired. I want to see what they're doing. And NXT just has so many talent that it was impossible to keep track of all those folks. So it makes sense to me. It's like going from 400 pounds down to 360. It's like, okay, you cut 40 pounds. Great. Now you probably still have a lot more to go. And a lot of people were like really mad at me because I said that. Like, how can you say they should be firing more talent? I'm like, I'm not saying they should fire more people. I'm saying they have room to fire more people. And nobody that they fired in this position or in this round of cuts is a big difference maker. Yes, there was a lot of potential here. Potential can only go so far. If they really are talented, they'll land somewhere else. We'll be able to see them on Impact, on Ring of Honor, on AEW, or whatever, and it'll all turn out okay. WWE has been releasing people all the time. It's just is a lot right now. And I think part of the reason is because of now that the pandemic is over, they feel like, okay, now we can make all the big releases that we wanted to make. Sure, they made some releases during the pandemic so they can get through the pandemic without, killing the quarters and all that kind of stuff. But now that the pandemic is over, every wrestling company is up and running. All the independents are up and running. Okay, we can start getting rid of people. They'll land on their feet pretty quickly. I hope, and this is one thing that I would like for them to do, is that if they are waiving people for budget cuts, then they need to get rid of that no compete clause. Let's let people go to work somewhere else, especially if they haven't been doing anything. Like, are you really going to lose something if you let Ari Sterling go to work somewhere else tomorrow? You fired him today, he goes to work somewhere else tomorrow. Like, you didn't promote him. You didn't make any merchandise for him. You don't have to cycle him out of the storylines or anything like that. There's nothing. Let's let the guy go fucking work somewhere else. Like, you're just being an asshole saying he can't go work somewhere for 30 days. Like, or 90 days. Like, that's just fucking stupid. Sure, it may make sense. It may make sense to have a 90-day no compete if you're going to have like a Bray Wyatt, because you probably got a ton of merchandise of his that you're trying to sell and get rid of. There's also other things that need to be changed, and he might have to get taken out of the video games. You might want to stop the printing on some action figures. I know that there's been people who are like Chelsea Green who got a WWE action figure months after they were released because the figures were already being made. It's like there's this incredible story of Mark Jindrak who got released from WWE in like, what was that, 2004, I think. And he still ended up in the video game, and he got like $53,000 because he was in the video game. They didn't have time to take him out, so they put him in it, and they had to give him royalties for the video game. So you have that kind of situation here with the 90-day no compete. Because that means you give not just the wrestler 90 days to chill or whatever, but you also giving all of the partnerships and everything a chance to catch up to the roster shifts that you got going on. The people in the office, they, when they do the opening packages, like I think I talked about this on Raw, that the opening packages were blacked out. And I was wondering why that was. And it was like, well, the Fiend's in there and Ric Flair's in there. And then when it came back for NXT, the Fiend was gone. Ric Flair is still there, but the Fiend was gone. And then I watched it again on SmackDown, and Ric Flair is still there, but for sure the Fiend is gone. They took him out of the opening then, now, forever, whatever. So that's, why it would make sense to do a 90-day no compete, because you want to give your partners and everybody who's interested in this brand an opportunity to update the roster and to, finish up whatever they were doing. If they were making some merchandise, hurry up and sell it and get it out of there. You don't want to be still selling guys merchandise and he jump ship somewhere else next week. Like, that just doesn't make any sense. But for a guy like Ari Sterling, who was on the roster less than a year, who is hurt if he just goes to work somewhere else tomorrow? Nobody. Nobody's hurt if he's let go. The same thing with like, Giant Zangier or like Kona Reeves. Kona Reeves, like, he wasn't even doing anything. Like, a lot of these people who weren't doing anything, like, they've been sitting at home already anyway. It wouldn't hurt you to let Leon Ruff go work somewhere else tomorrow. There's no merchandise. So if somebody has like a substantial merchandise, I say, okay, I no compete, so we can clean up all this stuff that we got, all the entanglements that we got. But for somebody who there is no royalties that's going to be dispersed because they're not in the video games, they're not going to be having any action figures, there's no t-shirts, there's no dolls, there's nothing of them. Let them go and just let them go work somewhere else. His face is not on a poster anywhere. You don't have any matches taped, which would be another good way to do it. It's like, oh, we got 6 months of matches taped. You might not want to jump ship somewhere. And we got you on TV in three weeks doing a job or something like that. You might want to protect yourself and say, okay, but that's the old days. Nobody cares about that shit today anyway, right? Dudes do jobs on Saturday and still be champion the next day. It's stupid. In any event, they should release these people from their no competes. That's one thing that I should say. I spent more time on that than I wanted to. 205 Live should be dead. I wouldn't be surprised if 205 Live is completely erased. The second line of 205 Live was the guys like Ari Sterling and Asher Hale and Jake Atlas and those guys. They were the heir apparents to the Tony Nese, Daivari, Bollywood Boys era of 205 Live. Those were the OGs. These guys were the second line. And now they fired all of them. Another thing that I noticed is that if you signed with a WWE after the closing of Evolve, you got a WWE contract and you probably got to work there for about 2 or 3 months, but that was it. If you signed after the closing of Evolve, you're gone. There's a number of talents. Now there's still some there. Harlan Bravado, they haven't got his bum ass yet. Josh Briggs, Joe Gacy, they both just made their NXT debuts, by the way. So those 3 guys were in Evolve when it closed. But everybody else, Kurt Stallion, Leon Ruff, Asher Hale, a bunch of other guys, Skylar Story, who was Brandy Lauren, they got rid of her. The only one that came from Evolve and made it to the main roster I think there's 3. I think because Keith Lee, I believe, went through Evolve. Riddle and Shotzi Blackheart. That's it. Everybody else, and I think they were signed to NXT Deals before Evolve closed. Everybody who was signed to NXT Deals after Evolve closed is pretty much gone. So, and I was a big supporter, if you've, been following the channel for a while, and I'm a big supporter of, when they closed Evolve and when they bought it, I said like they should hire those wrestlers and give them checks because you took away their job. Like you literally bought the place where they were working. You should give them an opportunity. And they did, it wasn't long. None of them lasted a year. So, it was little to nothing, but they did give them some money for a short period of time for the purchase of Evolve. And now they're gone. So if you signed with NXT, if you were on 205 Live, you're gone. If you're over the age of 35, you're on the cusp. And, so there are still some people behind in NXT, of course, So another thing, and probably the final thing I want to discuss here, is people who taking this thing personally. So Vince McMahon, of course, on the conference call says that AEW is, not competition and, don't know what their investment in talent is, but I know what our plans are. And when it comes to talent, maybe we can give them some more. And if people are like, oh, it's such a dick thing to say. Raj Giri was just so melodramatic. And I think that sometimes people are too emotionally attached to this kind of thing. And it seemed like a version of virtue signaling. Like, of course, it sucks that people are fired. But wrestlers are hired and fired all the time. They've always been hired and fired all the time. There's never been a place where I'm never going to fire any wrestlers. That's never happened. AEW does something that's, I think, smart. And I think that is something NXT probably should have been doing in the first place. Is that they don't actually hire people. Like, unless you saw a placard that says so-and-so is all elite, they're on a per appearance contract, which means they get paid per appearance. They mean they get paid only when they show up. They don't technically work there. So you will have people who will be on dark and dark elevation, and they'll be there 6 months straight, but never be offered a contract. Danny Limelight is one of them. Pineapple Pete is another one. Those guys will be on dark regularly, all the time. Alex Gracia is another one. They'll regularly feature them, but they'll be mostly jobbers, and that's about it. And they never actually sign a contract. And then when they find somewhere else, like Danny Limelight found his spot in MLW, they just say, whatever, I'm done with AEW. I won't go back there for a while. And that's just kind of how that's business. But NXT made the fatal mistake of actually hiring people, signing them to developmental contracts, paying them to train, paying them to do all of this stuff. And then walked up to him and was like, you know what? That contract we gave you in the past, can't do it. It's like, that's fucked up. People understand better if you're going to pay them per appearance. Then before they can, when they take themselves off the market, You know, they can know that they have that security, that they're going to at least get paid pretty regularly. You know, don't give them that security if you can't maintain it. That's one thing that I will agree with all of the virtue signalers online about people getting fired. I will agree with that. You know, don't offer people security of a developmental contract and then they don't get a chance to fucking develop. They don't get a chance to actually do anything if you fire them 4 months into after they sign the deal. Like, you know, like that doesn't make any sense. And that's one thing that I think is they should have a locked in for a year. If you sign me to a contract, I should get to work at least a year. And if I was a independent contractor and I was going to sign to WWE, that would be the first thing I would say. I would say no cut within a year. After the first year, you can cut me. But before that, no cut before the first year. And they, of course, probably never signed that fucking contract. But you actually, you know, when people are, and some of these talent are, and there was a story to give you an example. Murphy, he was talking about, you know, WWE hiring all this international talent, and then they release the international talent, and they have a hard time staying in the country and finding new work because they have to worry about visas and all that kind of stuff, right? So what WWE does is they yank the rug out from under them, and now these people who are international, like Bryan Reed, are like, what the fuck? You know, like I came to America to work here, and now I don't have a job. That this is bullshit. You know, like if they was to fire Kushida, who left Japan, uprooted his entire family and moved to Florida, and then you just decide, you know what, he's fired. Like you fucked this guy over. He probably sold his house or something like that to move to Florida. I definitely think there should be some type of security there. If you're asking people to uproot their lives, that's for international talent. Now, for independent talent, I don't think, of course, you should make that same thing. I don't think you should force them to live in Florida anyway. I know they tell them, hey, move to Florida because, you know, it's no income tax, you know, or is it no property tax? It's one of those two in Florida. And it's easier transportation and all that shit. But if you're asking people to travel and asking people to move, you definitely owe them a lot more than just some sudden budget cut bullshit. You definitely need to give them, like, I would be a second thing I would ask for is that I cannot be cut without 30 days notice, you know, or at least 60 days notice. Like you can tell me in April that I'm going to get released in August. Like, okay, we're doing budget cuts. Your name was on the list. You got 60 days before we officially cut you. You know, so if you got any affairs that you got going on, you want to, you know, get out of this apartment, you want to start looking for a new job or whatever, and then we can set it up that way. Because just cutting people randomly, especially like at, you know, at like 4:00 in the afternoon or some shit like that, is absolute bullshit. You know, but they have to put that stuff in their contracts. And I think that smarter people would sign these contracts now would probably think about those things, about the job security, about whether they fit what the roster, what the company is looking for at that time. Again, everybody who gets fired from WWE, if you get fired, it's probably just because for whatever this timeline that you're in now, you're not the right fit right now. You know, that's one of the things about Leon Ruff and Jake Atlas being fired that didn't bother me. Because, you know, all right, they get fired. If you know, NXT is going young, but you fire two young guys. They're like, okay, well, they're not ready right now. They got years. You know, they could come back in 4 years and be like the fucking Rock or something like that. Who knows? Doubtful, but who knows? You know, I have no idea. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know the future. In any event, people should be thinking about how best to protect themselves from these seemingly ridiculous releases. But I don't believe that people are legitimately upset about all these releases. I think they're more confused by them. And WWE doesn't do a good job because most companies don't have to explain why they're releasing talent. They don't do a good job of, you know, explaining why they're releasing talent. And people just start, you know, jumping out of their skin, you know, talking, you know, about this, they're doing this, they're doing that. And it's like, we don't know what they're doing. I don't have any idea. I don't have no idea whatsoever what they're doing. And to be quite honest, I don't want to know. I like the surprise factor. I want to turn on NXT one day as a completely different show. I would love that. I think that would be great. You know, And if Vince McMahon walking through NXT is what caused this trouble from the beginning, because remember they talked about that was one of those things that was going on a couple of weeks ago. Vince and Nick Khan and all of those guys went on a tour of NXT through the Performance Center and all that stuff. And they've been calling NXT talents to do dark matches. They have really put NXT under the microscope. And this is one of the things that when Vince McMahon said, hey, we want to give them more talent, I thought it was a joke, personally. And I see he was not joking. That was not a paper tiger. And if I was still on the NXT roster, I would be calling Vince or I would be calling Triple H, especially if I'm an older talent like a Kushida or a Roderick Strong. And I hear all these whispers about, oh, this is the changes that we're going to make. I want to know how I factor in or I quit. All right. That's just kind of how it would be. You're not going to put me on the Summer Jam screen, baby. You tell me what you're doing or I'm out of here. Just don't call me back. Let my contract lapse, cut me prematurely. I ask for my release or whatever the case may be, because I wouldn't like the limbo of not knowing what's going on, you know, and I don't like that idea. And I wouldn't like all these people getting released around me. I can understand how that could cause paranoia in a wrestler. I wouldn't like that. I wouldn't like, I would think that they had the sense to bring people in on what they were doing. But as they were walking through the Performance Center saying, oh, yeah, this is what we plan to do. These are our ideas for how we can make this place better. It may require some people to get released over the next several weeks. Some people will get released. And, at least you could be prepared for it just in case, a certain number of people are going to fail a final exam. So, when the grades come out, there's a chance that you could fail that final exam. If they told you ahead of time, there's going to be a certain number of people that are going to be released, and you start being like, okay, I want to know if I'm on that list, and then, whatever. But if it's just like boom out of nowhere, no, that will cause all kinds of paranoia. That would cause like mass paranoia. So my thing is, if you want to ask the question of whether I think this will be the last of the releases, I think probably not. I think there's probably going to be some more NXT releases. Again, the Raw, SmackDown, NXT rosters are so bloated. You can release more people and still not touch the people that we see every week. And still not touch them. You will still be cutting people that have tremendous amounts of talent. But if I'm looking at Ricochet, Humberto Carrillo, Angel Garza, Lucha House Party, that's 5 right there. Right? That's 5 right there. More people that you can cut. And nobody would notice they were gone until you announced it online. Like that kind of stuff. Back in the day when you fired somebody, when you released somebody, when Adam Bomb left, people were kind of like, where the hell did he go? Like they were just pushing this guy. Now he's gone. Like, where'd he go? Now they fire a bunch of people and you're like, I don't even know who half these people are. So it's like the idea that WWE is like damaging the brand or anything like that. It's like, well, no, they're restructuring. And they just hired this new guy, this heel figure guy. Start the clock on him. I don't know how long he's going to last. But apparently he's going to be taking over Cameron Seaman's job. He's going to be working with Triple H to develop talent. Probably do some recruiting and stuff like that too. All of this is going to be very interesting stuff. Instead of looking at it as a negative and, oh my God, they're firing on these people. You have to look at it as it's a very interesting time as a fan because you don't know what's going on next. If you thought WWE was predictable, firing Bronson Reed and Bray Wyatt in the span of 2 weeks and a bunch of other people, I would be thinking about that. But if I was Taya Valkyrie, aka Frankie Monet, if I was LA Knight, if I was Kushida, and all 3 of those people are over the age of 35, and they just signed contracts to NXT during the whole NXT is the third brand phase, quote unquote, I would be questioning whether you're going to call me up immediately or what's going on here. And I think they should have the stroke to go in there and be like, look, I'm a vet. Don't bullshit me. If I'm too old, just tell me now and start to phase me out, But if you're a young guy, just ride the wave, man. Get those WWE paychecks and do the best you can. If you're an older talent, you got a house to take care of and all that kind of shit, you definitely need to get in those offices and see what's going on. But that's all I got, man. I'm not really upset about any of the releases. It's just none of them are really a surprise. Nobody really is going to be a big miss, at least from what I see. We'll check back in 2 or 3 years and see how many of these people that WWE released over the last several months turn out to actually be anything. So like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, donate to the channel, support the channel. Thank you guys for your time. Peace and blessings, and I'll talk to you guys later.
I can